Thank you all for joining us and watching the United States of America. I'm Alexandra Mitchell. I'm the programming manager. I have with me, and I'm going to make sure I read these credits because both of these people did a lot for the United States of America. So I have William D. Caballero, who is the creator, director, writer, producer, animator, and voice actor for the series. And I have Elaine Del Valle, who is the producer and also a voice actor. Thank you guys both for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
To get started, I would just like to know, where did the inspiration for this project come from?
Sure. So I think for me, living under the previous presidential administration was a bit rough, a bit chaotic in many ways, and not just that, but I saw that in this administration was definitely a push towards more of like the extreme left, which also triggered a push from liberals to go to the extreme right. And I find a lot of inconsistencies and hypocrisies amongst both people on the extreme left and the extreme right. And I think as an artist, there are times when we need to create art that, pushes for like truths that will push humanity forward. And then there's other times for us to push for, like poking fun at our most extreme differences, because again, I think that's what makes us well-rounded individuals. If you only like consume what the extreme right is giving you, then you're not going to be well-balanced American, and the vice versa is true also. There's a little bit of each side, and it's more of like in the middle where we meet that I think we really come together as Americans. So it's these fringe groups that kind of divide us. And so so the United States of America touches upon this. It's a sort of sci-fi take on these two aliens. I knew I wanted to, I'm sorry, two humans. I knew I wanted to make them people of color, since I am Latino, Puerto Rican. I wanted the characters to be both people of color, and I wanted to touch on this social commentary and political satire in a way that was something that I hadn't really seen before, and also something that would challenge me to combine animation alongside live action sequences as well.
The other inspiration that it came from is the fact that William and I together were at another pitch fest in New York. And that's where we had a chance to meet up with the people at Brick TV, who we were pitching our animation comedy, scripted comedy, half hour, called 115 Ferry Street. And it's such a 115 Ferry Street. We knew that it is a very big project, and it really requires partners, and it's not something that we can do solely alone as independent artists. But when we went to this pitch fest, we went there with it, and we talked about it, and everyone loved it. But the investment wasn't available for us. But Brick TV wanted so much to work with us, and we decided that we would be able to come up with something along the lines of 115 Ferry Street that wouldn't be the budget that would be required for something as big as the idea was for 115 Ferry Street, which still exists, by the way. And we'd love to pitch it to anyone willing to hear it. So what we did was we came up with the comedy and the sort of personalities that were in 115 Ferry Street, and just riffed off of that. So it was another idea that was based on a little bit of 115 Ferry Street, although it has nothing to do with it, but just the feeling of it, the broad comedy of it.
Mm-hmm.
And as kind of both of you mentioned, and as I mentioned at the top, you all have a lot of credits on this piece. Could you guys talk a little bit about the production of the United States?
Sure. So I went to college at Pratt Institute, a private art college in New York City, and then later I graduated from NYU. But especially with a master's, especially at my time at Pratt, I majored in digital art. So I learned a lot of aspects of producing the visuals aspect, the actual production of it. But at NYU, I learned more about how to be a producer, how to be a screenwriter, things of that nature. So the show, I'm always used to wearing like 1,000 hats on projects, and for a show like this, I was kind of able to do all the stuff that I needed to do to make it happen. The only other individuals besides our producing and funders at Brick where I needed a 3D modeler who modeled the two characters, Paco and Cornelius, and a rigger. So the modeler models the way they look, and the rigger goes inside and builds little like structural frames so I can move the fingers and put the like expressions and stuff. And I exported each one of those as PNGs, as transparent images with transparent backgrounds, and we drop them into the background. The modeler also modeled the cockpit set. That's the only piece that was 3D printed and painted by hand. So in terms of this project, it was kind of both challenging, but also easy because I've done it for such a long time in terms of I'm going to write the scripts, but I know what can be done and what can't be done. And sometimes there's a middle ground of like, this part would be really great in the middle. I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to try to work through it. And those parts, I think, really inform my creative process and help push me forward. There's a few of those instances where parts were a little bit challenging at first, but I was able to use all my creative skills to make them happen. So yeah, so I'm really used to it. I think part of it is also my, upbringing as a Puerto Rican American, just being resourceful with everything you have of being creative with the limited resources you have, and that's really made it so that I could do a project. I don't necessarily need to contact, well, I need a writer, I need a producer, I need this, I need that. Like I'm like, nope, I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna make the sample tape to the best of my abilities, and then hopefully the funders or the other partners will come in after. So I think it's projects like this are a testament to my ability to work with really small, intimate teams to push these ideas forward. Yeah.
And then I think for me, because I also work as a director, a writer, a producer, all those things on many other projects. But every time I work with William, as his co-producer, I just want to be there to support him, to encourage him, to let him know I have his back at all times. Let's figure this out. If I don't agree with something, I'll, talk about this is why I don't think this works in the script, or let's change it to this, and then I also did whatever would help us to save money to accommodate the budget that we did have through the generosity of Brick TV. We wanted to be able to utilize it in the best of ways. And I think we accomplished that.
You definitely did. It's a really enjoyable piece. And William, something you brought up earlier was using kind of that mixed medium. So, a majority of it is animated, but we also have kind of the archival footage. At what point did you decide that you were kind of going to do a mix of those pieces?
Sure. I mean, I think I needing again to be resourceful to find all the different elements that you're going to mix into the project. So I think the archival footage, I just wanted a little bit of that just to showcase the New York City that the two characters grew up in. Part of our understanding with Brick is that they wanted not a strong connection to Brooklyn. I mean, me and Elaine and I were both raised in Brooklyn. I was born in Brooklyn, but more raised in North Carolina. But we're like, hey, let's make the characters both from Brooklyn and make that just a little part of their background story, but not like the project doesn't revolve around that. So the archival footage was just used to sort of, another part of our arsenal to create this and move this forward.
Great. And so the audience has seen the pilot. Can we get a little teaser of what else is in the season?
Sure. So the pilot is really the premise, the setup and the premise of the show, in which we set up that they've been lost in space and they finally get back to Earth, and they get back to Earth during an election, which hypothetically, so I was writing this in 2020 during the when the pandemic was underway, And, you know, we didn't know who was going to win this election. We didn't even know who was going to be the Democratic nominee. So my whole feeling was like, doesn't matter really who wins or who loses. Like the people on the losing side are going to be really pissed that their candidate didn't get accepted. So I'm going to write that into this. And I'm like, it's going to be so bad. That's going to trigger World War III and the world is going to end as we know it. And so, yeah, so now they're in the Illegal Aliens Protection Program. And through the help of their intergalactic social worker Galexandria, who I think is an integral and hilarious part of this project. Unfortunately, and it's voiced by Elaine. Unfortunately, she's only in the project for the last like few seconds, but basically as the rest of the 5 episodes go on, she takes them to different planets, and at each of these planets, the characters will meet an alien ambassador from those planets. And so each ambassador, in a way, is a archetype, a stereotype of a progressive, a leader in Earth or a different movement from Earth, a political movement. So one is sort of this leader who's kind of like this alien with like rocks all over his face from planet Rockalok, who tells a story about how it's a moon. Rockalok orbits around Plexico, which is a desert planet, and all of a sudden these Plexicans have been coming in and staying over their like visas, and so they have to build an intergalactic wall to separate the two. So this thing about building a wall. Next episode will feature an alien from planet 99%, which is again the other extreme, in which there's a crater on the planet where they gathered the top 1% and they blew up the top 1%. And what happens is it becomes this whole thing where Cornelius is like, but if you blew up the top 1%, it doesn't mean that now the top 1% of planet 99% is the top 1%. And so they keep on blowing themselves up. So it's this sort of, I want to examine the inconsistencies with all of these different theories of like, because basically in American politics, it's like things will be better if only this group was persecuted or this group wasn't allowed, whether it's the immigrants, whether it's the LGBT community, whether it's the top 1%, there's always like a group that has to be antagonized. So each of these alien planets, there's one group that's antagonized, even if they want to be the most peaceful planet around, like planet Pansexion, which is a pro-LGBT planet that accepts all sorts of sexual minorities, but not straight people. There's always like one group that's vilified in this. And in one episode, it's about the pandemic. And there's this thing going on, and they're all controlled by this invasive species. So yes, I'm really pushing to take what I see happening around the world and make it have as much social commentary as possible in this sort of sci-fi context.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you, William and Elaine, for sharing with us the pilot, and we're excited to watch more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.